him up a daily fantasy. His number too high, then I'm probably fading him. He been on the road, he gon' eat up my salary. I hit up by, he gon' lie before lock. Play back to back, then I probably won't pick on the DFS bachelor. Good as it gets. Build a few liners and hit me a leg. He had a good game, but it might be a trick. Log in the Slack so I know who to pick. Sharing our liners, we all gon' get rich. New to this game, you should come to the page. You might want some cash and get a good laugh. DFS Sports, we gon' run up a bag. He heard every game and it's making me mad. You buying your lineups, I think you a cheater. DFS bachelor, he the new leader. Yeah.
Happy Halloween, everyone. It's Take Two time here at the Bachelor Pad. I, of course, am the DFS Bachelor. He is Donnie Rightside, who has just been absolutely on fire with the look, I can't even talk here on Take Two, with the contrarian picks. I mean, anytime you call a fullback touchdown, the Kyle Juszczyk touchdown was absolutely amazing, a terrific call. And so we like to double our knowledge around here. We've been on an absolute roll, so glad to have you here, and thanks for settling in on Take Two. I apparently need to improve on my producer credentials here in the back.
Yeah, well, we're two older guys here, Kyle. But I do like to say, like, and it fits right in, right? DFS. You have a lot of mock drafts. Well, behind the scenes, me and Kyle have actual mock shows just to make sure everything goes well. But yes, the Juszczyk touchdown last week was a lot of fun. It was one of those where if you're watching, because I'm on the East Coast here, but you pop on, the dish and you watch it through satellite and like, let me see what happens here, and you catch it out of the corner eyes, like that was a white fullback that just scored that touchdown, and I'm pounding away on Twitter. I gotta let Kyle know this, and of course, everybody out there that watches the show was, sending me screenshots. They had him in their lineup, and great call and Juszczyk. So yes, anytime we can get the fullback touchdown at a cheap price, that's a good week here in DFS.
I mean, talk about street cred here in the DFS world. So I absolutely love that. Getting some house cleaning out of the way. First things first, a big thank you to you all for watching, all the support, the kind words, liking the video, sharing the video with your friends, retweeting it out. All that stuff means a lot. Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the team. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Get access to all the content we have Monday night, Thursday night, Millie Makers, first looks, final looks, all sorts of stuff here. And also make sure you check out those video descriptions. We got a link down there for Sportsbook Review. You can see these two beautiful mugs 4 times a week live over at Sportsbook Review, including Sunday morning, an hour before kickoff. We go live, answer your questions, go over our final picks, plays, bets, props, you name it, we do it. So be sure to check all that out. If you can't find it in the video description, you can follow us on Twitter. You see our Twitter handles right there on the screen, at DFS Bachelor, at RightSideVP. We're always tweeting out when we're going live, 5 minutes before, a half hour before, so you can find the links over there as well. And it goes a lot smoother over there. There's no take twos and no sloppiness at the beginning, because Donnie runs the show instead of my dumbass, so it ends up going a lot smoother, shockingly enough. Also, if you wish to qualify for our weekly $50 PayPal giveaway brought to you by our friends at Tax Relief Advocates, making your tax debt disappear faster than, my skills at running a show at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning, you can give them a call at 1-800-411-9633. And they sponsor this giveaway. Our winner this week is Winter Warm. So congratulations to Winter Warm. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up in the comment section. Get that PayPal info over, and we'll get that sent to you. So congratulations to you, and a big thank you to our friends at Tax Relief Advocates. Also, if you want my player pools, projections, cheat sheets, wide receiver, cornerback cheat sheet articles, stacks articles, everything you could think of here, use it in the lineup generator, the mass lineup generator, late swap optimizers. If you have a late scratch, you can do all that. Use my player pool, etc. Click that link in the video description below. You can try Draft Dashboard for 30 days for $1. My friends at Overlay DFS, this is the last day to qualify. Go to overlaydfs.com. The new matchup shop allows you to parlay your fantasy picks plus minus numbers. I got a nice 6-pick parlay in this week over there at Overlay DFS. If you go to at Overlay DFS on Twitter, screenshot your 3-pick parlay, you can qualify to get free entry into my Slack chat, which no one's been allowed in almost 2 years. So it's a very exclusive group, if you will. We talk lineup construction, answer questions. I give marriage advice in there as well, so it's a great place to be to fix your life up. So check them out at Overlay DFS as well. And don't forget, if you want winners, team totals, if you are betting on football, if you're betting on baseball, if you're betting college basketball, you need to go to rightwager.com. Donnie knows what he is doing. He has been in the betting industry a long time. He knows what he is doing, and the winning percentage this year is what? Something crazy this year, right?
73%. 73% we're hanging in there. So we've done it in the past, having an entire season. Less is more. If you're coming over for a ton of plays, that's not what you're going to get. And as Kyle said, we do a lot of shows there on SBR for all that good stuff to hit everything. But if you want exactly what I'm betting on, we'll be in good shape here.
Yeah, so check it out at rightwager.com. It's a great place to go. And I think that is the house cleaning. I even remembered the winner. So now for our second take here on quarterbacks, even though I've already erased it, I think I have it memorized here in my head. Looking at quarterback above 6K, what are you looking at this week, Donnie?
Yeah, above 6K, and this is going to be a common theme that we're going to talk about because now we're switching into that fall weather, heading into the winter, November, and this week usually we'll get, hey, maybe one or two weather games. You're getting a lot, and you're getting a lot of impact in fantasy football because if it's cold weather, they can still score points. If it's rainy weather, snowy weather, they can score points. You saw it even last week in a snow game. They put up a lot of points between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs, but when you get that combination of possible rain and also heavy wind conditions above 20 miles an hour with gusts at 35 and 40 miles an hour, that's when it gets a little bit tricky. So when we're talking about spending above, you're going to get a lot of value at the quarterback position because if you're spending up for Mahomes, the key contributor in this game is not the actual Kansas City Chiefs, if that makes sense. It's the Jets. If the Jets come to town, Kyle, and score 10 points, I mean, yeah, Kansas City can score 35, sure, but you need the other team to participate to have that high ceiling enough to justify Patrick Mahomes at 8,100. But if you're good with maybe 250 yards and 3 scores out of Mahomes and say, hey, you know what? There's not much on the board to go with. I can agree with that, but I want the full 4 quarters. I want a chance for that high ceiling out of my quarterback specifically. I'm going to pay top end at 8,100. Russell Wilson going up against a pretty good defense with San Francisco and a banged-up running game. That's actually good news for the Seattle Seahawks. And if this says, well, wait, how can that make sense? Because if you don't have that running game to lean on where Chris Carson's getting 16, 17 carries for 89 yards and stealing goal line carries, that means Russell Wilson, we can let Russ cook again. 300 yards is a great possibility because he has great wide receivers. But if you're not getting a whole lot on the ground, that just means the quarterback has to pass more and make more plays with his own feet. So 7,800 seems like a decent price. Aaron Rodgers, if we had Kyle, Green Bay, 55 degrees, no wind, no weather conditions to worry about. He would absolutely light up that secondary, which is really injured for the Minnesota Vikings, and would be justified to pay 7,600. I think you still get a decent performance out of Aaron Rodgers because he does throw a really crisp ball, tight spiral, and has some weapons. But if you were going to be trying to mask a really bad defense, which Minnesota's trying to do, 25 to 35 mile an hour winds and 37, 38 mile an hour temperatures is probably the way to do it. And also, when you look from the other side of the spectrum, Dalvin Cook is back. Maybe they feed him and say, you know what, let's try to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field and try to steal this football game. Lamar Jackson, 7,400. Typically, you'd buy it into it because he would throw for what? 180 plus yards and 2 touchdowns, maybe 75, 80 yards on the ground and a touchdown. But now you're looking at some windy weather conditions along with rain with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't justify taking Lamar Jackson at 7,400 because what is his absolute ceiling? You're going to need him to run for over 100 yards and at least 1 score to try to justify that price. Same thing with Josh Allen. You're playing a good defense, but you're in windy, rainy conditions in Buffalo against a team in the New England Patriots that isn't going to score 30 points in this game. At least we don't think are going to score 30 points. So how far is he going to be pushed to have an elite game, even though he has all his offensive weapons back? Zeroing in here, Ryan Tannehill going against Cincinnati. Maybe the least of the worst weather conditions out there in the Midwest. 17, 18 miles an hour wind. Doesn't look like it's going to get too much rain. His high floor in this game should be decent. 225, 2 scores, maybe scramble around for 25 to 30 yards in that game. And also, if we're sliding it down to right around that $6,000 limit, Kirk Cousins, if the weather conditions aren't so bad on Sunday, he's going to be playing from behind, has 2 elite wide receivers and Dalvin Cook back. Maybe he can salvage something for you here at that 6,000-point spot here for us.
I like it, yeah, and you talked about it at the top. If this was a normal weather game, like you touched on, I would be all over Aaron Rodgers. And I still think he could be okay. I kind of worry, can Minnesota keep up and put any pressure on them to score? And, you're talking temperatures in the 20s and 30s with 25-mile-an-hour winds, which I guess they're saying it could taper down towards the end of the game a little bit. Again, I'm not a meteorologist, so I have no idea exactly what's going to happen, but it doesn't look good from every report that I look at. So for me, the only quarterback I have pegged right now that I'm really interested in is Russell Wilson, and you mentioned it with the top 3 running backs, all very, very iffy. I guess they're going to see how they look on the field before the game. Should be a competitive game, divisional game against the 49ers. These games are always close. So they're going to have to, as they say, let Russ cook. And if he's throwing the ball 35, 40 times and also their leading rusher, I like Russell Wilson quite a bit at 7,800. And then going down under 7K here, I like Justin Herbert against Denver at 6,900. That's actually a decent weather game in Mile High, which is strange. You know, if you said, hey, there's going to be 6 of these 11 games are going to be bad weather, you'd say, oh, well, that one in Mile High is probably going to be it. But no, it looks like, mid to low 50s. No wind. Justin Herbert's been absolutely on fire. Only one game under 25 in his last 5 games, a 42 last week. I like Justin Herbert quite a bit against a Broncos team that's 22nd in the league right now in terms of fantasy points allowed. 2 opposing quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill, you mentioned it. I like him a lot. I'm really watching the weather in that game. I'm a little bit concerned about the weather in that game. But in terms of the real bad, you mentioned it, 15 to 20. Neither Ryan Tannehill throws the ball deep a little bit more than Joe Burrow does, but I still think they can absolutely hit value there. Tannehill and Burrow make a whole ton of sense to me as well. Burrow at 6,200 with no Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard back in the lineup this week. So I think Burrow, even though he's got a banged up offensive line, 3 of the 5 starters I believe are out this week on that offensive line. Luckily, on the opposite side of the field, the Tennessee Titans have the lowest sack rate in the NFL. That secondary's been torched. I think Burrow stacked up with Green, Boyd, T. Higgins. I think you can go all those routes. I certainly like Joe Burrow quite a bit at 6,200, and that's really it for me. Those are the 4 I'm really focusing on. I like Herbert, I like Burrow, I like Tannehill, and I like Russell Wilson there above 6K. Everyone else, the weather concerns, and you mentioned it with Mahomes and the Jets, just doesn't really do it for me this week. When we look under 6K at quarterback, looking at some value, what do you like there?
I'll tell you, right off the bat, 5,900, Phillip Rivers. You're talking about an older quarterback, and we say it each week, whether it's on SBR or here, you like Phillip Rivers in a controlled environment, playing in a dome, no weather conditions, no windy, no rain conditions where the ball would slip out of his hand. So I think he's a decent play because he does have a high floor in this game. If we're matching him up against Detroit, who's going to sling it all over the field, Matthew Stafford, but they are going up against a pretty good defense in Indianapolis. But the thing I like about Phillip Rivers, getting Pittman back this week, who was just activated off IR. So if we look at T.Y. Hilton, Pittman, you have a solid offensive line. Ryan Kelly, the center, is probably going to miss this game, but still, obviously, both guards and both tackles very solid and a good ground game. What can we look at Phillip Rivers here as a worst-case scenario? Honestly, 225, 2 scores, and that's not bad at 5,900, and he has the chance to have an even better week depending on how Detroit is able to move the football on offense versus that Indianapolis defense. Nick Foles, I'm completely out on. I mean, you're taking a look at a guy who doesn't really have a high ceiling as is. You're taking away their only credible threat. So if they're going to be scoring, Kyle, it's 11 play drives for 68 yards and a field goal. Yep. That's going to be completely damage control, and that he's completely out for me. Same thing with Cam Newton. Maybe if you had some weapons or a revamped offense for New England going against Buffalo, he can run for 60 to 70 yards on the ground and a touchdown, throw for 225. But bad weather conditions coming into that game, no Julian Edelman, which doesn't really make too big of a difference. No N'Keal Harry. Those guys haven't really operated very well over the past 4 weeks anyway. But again, bad weather conditions. What is his ceiling in this game? Honestly, 200 yards passing, 60 yards on the ground. I'm just not buying in, even though he's only 5,700. Tua Tagovailoa, an interesting one here. Yeah. Talented rookie. Rookies have had some success this year. I do think the Rams are going to score some points. So we're not looking at a high price point with Tua at 5,600. I think he can get 35 to 45 yards on the ground. 2 touchdown passes is legitimate in this game. Watching all week here long, making sure Devontae Parker's in that lineup so you have that ability. One-on-one coverage. You can still throw it up. We saw back at Alabama. He is willing to take those deep shots if they are available. So all systems go for that Miami offense. You're not paying a lot for him. The one boomer bust quarterback, depending on the actual windy conditions and rainy conditions, to me, would be Derek Carr going against that Cleveland defense. You saw last week shredded versus a rookie quarterback in Joe Burrow. But again, you're talking about 25-mile-an-hour plus winds, maybe some rain into the forecast, and a really good offensive line and really good running back in Josh Jacobs, where if you're John Gruden, even though you like to pass, are you really coming in this football game going, you know what, boy, I really love to see Carr throw 40-plus times in the rain and wind. I don't know if that's going to happen. And then as we get down to a pain point perspective, which you like to go as low as possible and see if maybe you can buy that extra running back. Maybe you want to pair Kamara up and, King Henry for Tennessee. paying for Sam Darnold, it sounds ridiculous on the notion, and it should be banned from the show.
Yes.
But when I see a price point of a quarterback at 4,800 that has a 20-point margin in the game, which means he's still going to be playing in the fourth quarter, Kyle, if it's 35-10, and if he can throw 2 touchdowns in this game, I have him matched up with somebody else that if you want a pain card and a completely contrarian card to save money on other spots, listen to me later at wide receiver. But Sam Darnold at 4,800 is hilarious. It's very Halloween to me, Kyle.
Hey, it's spooky. Here, there we go. We'll do the corny cliches. Why the hell not? And you have way more balls than I do. I don't know if I could ever.
4,800.
48. I mean, it is the price of a backup quarterback. It literally is, and justifiably so. But my God. I don't know if I can do it, but now I might have to throw it in like a $1 single.
It's got to be in there. Yep, it's got to be.
Hell not.
You can win $1 million on. You can win $1 million on this bet.
You could, if he throws 3 touchdowns and you have him in your lineup, you're probably winning $1 million. It's fucking crazy. You're probably right. Some of those under 6K quarterbacks, I just have a few marked. Now, the beginning of the week, it was Derek Carr, check him off, cheat sheet him, tell everyone to play him. Now you worry about those conditions, and it looks like of all the games, this is probably the worst weather. Maybe Green Bay, but this looks like it has more rain, and the winds are sustained throughout the game from what I'm seeing right now. So, I have Phillip Rivers at 5,900 coming off his best game of the year before the bye week. Put up a 29 on DraftKings, threw for 370 yards. They're in the Dome against a bad Detroit secondary, so I don't mind Phillip Rivers. The only, the downside is you need him to be on, and you need... If there's any pressure at all, which Detroit isn't a great front, it's not like they typically put a ton of pressure on quarterbacks, but if he's off a little bit, he's not getting out there and getting you 30 yards rushing and bailing you out with some ground game. You need it all through the air. You need him to throw the ball in the red zone, so it's always an iffy proposition there with Phillip Rivers. But just considering the conditions everywhere else and his price point, I don't have a problem there. I do think Tua's very interesting. He's got some rushing upside. He's a very accurate guy. It's a tough Rams defense. It's a tough first game. You've got the elite pass rush up the middle with Aaron Donald. You've got 2 really, really good corners in the secondary in Darius Williams and Jalen Ramsey. So it's going to be tough sledding. I am encouraged that Devontae Parker is going to play. You made that as a great point in our first take of this show that no one would have been able to hear you on, since I'm I'm a flawed man, What do you want me to say? So I do think he's sort of interesting down there. And now with Derek Carr and dealing with that weather, one game where we have decent weather is up there in Seattle for that 49ers-Seahawks game. No team in the league has allowed more fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks than the Seattle Seahawks. That secondary is absolutely dreadful. The running back core is banged up with San Francisco. No Raheem Mostert, no Jeff Wilson Jr., Jerick McKinnon battling tired legs. May get some Tevin Coleman back this week. How much? We really don't know, so they're relying on a guy like JaMychal Hasty, their number 5 running back, for all intents and purposes. So Jimmy Garoppolo at 5,400 against the worst secondary in the league, even though they're without Deebo Samuel as well. I do think that there is some upside there. If they can get going on the ground just a little bit and work off that play action, maybe, just maybe, Garoppolo can hit value there. If you're going to have a banged-up offense, the one defense you want to see right now, especially in the secondary, is the Seattle Seahawks. So that's the route I could go as well. And then Sam Darnold, I'm going to have to sleep. That's probably going to keep me awake a little bit tonight. We'll have to see about that. I might have to throw him in a lineup or two just for the hell of it. Moving over to running back, we talked about all the weather. So running backs are going to be at a premium this week, and there is some value because of some injuries at the running back spot. No Aaron Jones, no Joe Mixon, etc. What are you looking at here? 6K and above on DraftKings at running back.
Yeah, a couple guys, and always with running back, I think you get some solid value in that 6K range. But if you're paying up for guys, usually there's 1 or 2, and Zeke Elliott's no longer on the draft sheet since it is a night game. One of those guys with that really high floor. Alvin Kamara typically for me would be a buy, but 8,200, Kyle. I need one of those games where he's going up against like the Cincinnati defense, which I'm going to talk about the second highest running back of the week in just a moment. Alvin Kamara going up against the NFC South, Carolina's defense, Atlanta's defense. I'll pay the 8,200 without having the 2 wide receivers because he will be a focal point of the offense, a lot more screens, a lot more dump offs out of the backfield. But now you're going into Chicago on grass, so it's not a fast surface to begin with. You're going up against a Chicago team that doesn't really have an electric offense, to say the least. So how many points do you really need? So am I going to be engaged in a shootout where 8,200 will, help me out with Alvin Kamara getting 15 touches as a running back, another 10 touches as a slash running back wide receiver. I just don't see 8,200 because I don't think his ceiling enough to quantify the 8,200 would be 175 total yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. Yeah. He's talented enough to get that, but I don't think the situation's dictated with how good Chicago's defense is and how porous the offense for the Chicago Bears are. Taking a look at Derrick Henry, 8,000, completely justified in this. I've been, betting wise when we try to tie in DFS and gambling. You can do whatever you want against Cincinnati's defense. Now they're down also Carlos Dunlap, so you're going to be able to run the football. If you think they're going to be able to win, he's getting 20-plus carries in this game. If he gets under 125 total yards and no touchdowns, I would be shocked in this game. Yeah. So his ceiling is very high, and also along with his floor, you can look at that. Dalvin Cook coming back typically against a Green Bay defense, 7,500. Where do I sign up? You saw even last year busting off 75-yard runs against the Green Bay defense. But now you throw in cold conditions. You can maybe stack the line of scrimmage. Is he actually on a pitch count? Mike Zimmer says no. But does that mean he usually gets 25 touches? Now he can only get 15, and we want to see where he lands? That's a tough one to quantify, the 7,500. Yeah. Aaron Jones is out. Kareem Hunt going against Las Vegas. That's a decent look here because, again, you're looking at rainy, windy conditions, and he's still the lead back, but you are going to pay over 6,000 for him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 6,500. He's going to get a lot of touches in this game, but also there's a guy a little bit lower we're going to talk about that may be dominating in the late third quarter and fourth quarter. We'll leave a little bit of teaser on that. James Conner at that 6,400 position. Usually just by volume you would like that, but you're going against an elite defense in some rainy, windy conditions in Baltimore. I don't know if I want to, single out Conner in this football game, but there are some other guys as we slide it down a little bit lower. I really like Josh Jacobs in this game versus the Cleveland Browns. He's going to get 25 touches in this game with a big, nasty offensive line. Saw the pictures yesterday from the Raiders practice. Trent Brown will be in the lineup for this game. In windy weather conditions, he's getting a lot of touches. I think he could do some damage at 6,200. And then moving it down, everybody's going to be on Williams from Green Bay, just saying he's the lead back, no Aaron Jones. Yeah. So why not go ahead and ride? It's not a bad price at 6,100 in some bad weather conditions, but I do like in that $6,000 range, I think Josh Jacobs has a big week this week.
Yeah, I love the Josh Jacobs call. I absolutely agree. And I agree on Kamara, too. I'm still going to have him in my player pool, and if I'm making 100 lineups, say, he'd probably be in 10 or 15 of them just in case he goes off.
You could put Sam Darnold with him. See that? That's how you can pay up for him.
Put in that Lego policeman and get him in there. And they're not just without Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, also Marquez Callaway, who was their leading target getter last week, with the top two receivers out, so it's a really banged-up offense. In New Orleans, the problem is Chicago can just key on them, and that's a good defensive team. They know how to stop key players from the other team, so I think that's tough. Derrick Henry, absolutely. You can fire him up. Cincinnati can't stop anybody on the ground. We talked about the rain and the windy conditions there, so if Tennessee's, Cincinnati's going to be forced to throw because they're throwing out Giovanni Bernard at running back. Giovanni Bernard's not going to run 25 times down your throat. They're going to have to throw the football 45, 50 times. But the Tennessee Titans, on the other hand, might slow it down a little bit, run the football. Derrick Henry, a great play at the top. I'm glad you mentioned that about Dalvin Cook. So coming back from a groin injury, right, and they say, okay, and Green Bay allows the second most fantasy points to running backs. Absolutely terrible against the run. But, are you going to really put a full workload on your star running back? He's probably not 100%, probably closer to 80, 85%. Freezing weather, sore groin, coming in. God, it makes me really nervous. When I look at that 6,000 price, I might be tempted in tournaments to throw some Alexander Madison, even though I think it's a high price for a backup running back. All it takes is one little tweak for Dalvin Cook, or maybe they even split the carries. Dalvin Cook gets a 40-yard run inside the 30. They take him out for a few plays to rest him. Madison gets in the end zone. It's a tournament-only play, and it's, he's got a scary low floor if Dalvin Cook is in a full work capacity. But again, Green Bay very susceptible against the run in those conditions. They could both be interesting. I like Kareem Hunt quite a bit. The Raiders allow the third most fantasy points in the league to opposing running backs. Kareem Hunt should be highly featured in this game, not just in the running game with those wins, but in the short passing game as well, where you get that full point per reception on DraftKings. I think Kareem Hunt is pretty interesting. Then looking at the team that gives up the fourth most fantasy points, the Detroit Lions. So Jonathan Taylor. Now, kind of been frustrating with Jonathan Taylor. He's only playing about 50% of the snaps. They're going to Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins more than I think they should. It's pretty frustrating to watch. But if you think the Colts are a better team, which I do, if you think that defense can hold down the Detroit offense, which I think they can, Jonathan Taylor should be featured a little bit in this game at 6,600. I can take a shot there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I do like him at 6,500. I think the Chiefs are playing from ahead the entire game, which means you should have more volume in the running game. I am a little concerned that Andy Reid's a player's coach. Andy Reid likes to do nice things for his players. So you bring in Le'Veon Bell 3 weeks ago. It was not a harmonious exit from New York. He does not like the Jets. Might be time where they let Le'Veon Bell kind of beat up on his old team a little bit. Still have exposure to him, but it makes me nervous. Josh Jacobs, one of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. I know he's been limited in practice, but they sort of do that with him every week, that hip, etc. Josh Jacobs against Cleveland in those conditions, I think, should have a big game. And I really like him on Fanduel, where it's only a half point per reception. He's not really featured in the passing game. They'll bring in Devontae Booker and Jalen Richard, etc., in those passing down situations. But I do like Josh Jacobs. And at 6,100, you mentioned it, Jamal Williams, the Vikings, 16th against opposing running backs. Lots of wind and rain. No Aaron Jones. Went off for 21 last week. It's a little weird paying that much for Jamal Williams, but I certainly think he can hit the mark. So I do like him as well at 6,100. Going under the 6K range, what are you looking at running back-wise?
Yeah, right off the bat, if you're looking for volume, and a lot of times that's really what you're paying for, opportunities. You're looking at Montgomery for Chicago because you figure it's going to be a slower down game. You figure he's going to get 20 touches and maybe the opportunity, if they do get down to the goal line, he can carry one into the end zone. So for 5,900, if I'm looking at possibly 20 touches from a running back, I'll pay for that, even though I don't know how high that upside is actually going to be. But if he does factor in, runs well, 20 carries, picks up 100 total yards in that game and a touchdown, 5,900 is certainly going to be justified. Giovanni Bernard, same as last week. It's a wonderful play because you don't really want them playing from a lead perspective. And if they're coming from, behind in the game or being down late in the fourth quarter, Giovanni Bernard, just like last week, scored a late touchdown through the air. I think he has the capability of doing that again. He's not really the guy that you want to lean on saying, hey, I want 15 carries from, but if he's going to be able to be targeted 7 or 8 times out of the backfield, 5,800 going against a porous defense in a game that you believe Tennessee should score 30-plus points, that's not a bad option at 5,800. I don't think you can be burned, so always take a look at that. Really, I don't know how high the ceiling is, but boy, that floor is pretty high. So I'm going to factor in on him getting close to 100 total yards in that game and also chance to cash in a touchdown. I think that's legitimate. Jerick McKinnon for San Francisco, it should be an easy play, but it almost feels like sometimes with San Francisco, we're getting the Bill Belichick effect, like, hey, man, McKinnon should have a really good week. And it's like, well, why isn't the guy playing at all? And is Tevin Coleman coming back? There's way too many probabilities in that game to just factor on and say, well, if he gets 10 touches, I'll be happy with it. I don't want to pay 5,700 where he gets 5 carries and I'm on the way out in that. Melvin Gordon's an interesting one that we look at because, yes, he's playing his old team, but the guy that you want to be factored in on who has practice in a limited capacity this week is Phillip Lindsay. If Lindsay is down, Melvin Gordon's a very good play in this football game, but if Phillip Lindsay is up, there's a chance that they're really going to get a carry share close to 50-50. And to me, the more explosive running back and the guy you probably would want to take if it is a 50-50 share would be Phillip Lindsay, who's credited just a little bit lower. Another interesting one here in that range, Myles Gaskin for Miami, really coming on late, and the guy that nobody really talks about all that much, but now you get a rookie quarterback in place. There's a good chance here, Kyle, that he's going to get 20 touches in this football game at 5,200 and a chance to score. That's not a bad buy option. But then as we get down to some of the lower end of the spectrum, we talk about the Le'Veon Bell's 4,600. Typically, you wouldn't look to a backup running back or a veteran running back, but this is one of those games where you can factor this in, Kyle. If they are on the 1-yard line, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not getting this football. They're going to make sure that Le'Veon Bell scores a touchdown in this game. And for 4,600, you can see, even if it's crazy because you're looking to stack some of these things up and maybe you don't need Patrick Mahomes. Even if you had Clyde Edwards-Helaire and also Le'Veon Bell on the same team stacked up, I can see 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns between those two guys. It sounds kind of crazy to do, but you're only paying 4,600 for the backup running back, who I do think is going to score a touchdown, and that's some pretty good juice to go with. But the guys, I slide it all the way down and try to factor in where I can get in a steal, because when we're looking at last week, the Kyle Juszczyks of the world at 4,000, say, hey, man, I'm praying for a touchdown. If I get it, it pays for itself. Look no further than Baltimore with Gus Gus Edwards at 4,400.
Yep.
He's going to be the lead dog. J.K. Dobbins is a really good running back, but when you're getting on the goal line, which you figure it's going to be a hard-fought football game and some rain and wind, he's going to me get 15 to 20 carries in this game. And if I'm paying 4,400, even though the Steelers are elite, that's a value play I want. I see him getting in the end zone this week, Kyle.
Yeah, I like Gus Edwards and I like J.K. Dobbins, and I think it's a great point you brought up with Hilaire and Le'Veon Bell. If you're playing tournaments, if you're playing a 50-50 cash game, you probably don't want to put two running backs in the same lineup. But if you're playing tournaments and you're trying to be contrarian and you're trying to be different, having two running backs in the same lineup, we saw it a few years ago with Kamara and Mark Ingram. I saw that lineup win hundreds of thousands of dollars with both running backs in the same lineup. I like Le'Veon Bell quite a bit. He's my favorite value running back this week. I think Andy Reid lets him loose. I think that's a great play. You could take a shot on JaMychal Hasty. Again, I would really wait on the Tevin Coleman news. If Tevin Coleman is going to be active and take some of those snaps, and no, Jerick McKinnon, they've already said he's got tired legs, so I just don't know. I don't know if that's coach speak and they're trying to get everyone off of him. The 49ers running back situation right now, me personally, I'm staying away. If you are desperate to play someone or you're looking for some savings and maybe that afternoon-only slate, maybe you could go with JaMychal Hasty. I do like David Montgomery and Giovanni Bernard at 59 and 58. Look, even if it's, bad conditions in Tennessee there or in Cincinnati, they're going to throw the short little quick passes to Giovanni Bernard. He's going to get 5 to 7 targets in this game, probably carry the ball about 10 to 15 times. So Giovanni Bernard at 5,800. I'm glad you mentioned Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon had a very tumultuous year last year with the Chargers, wanted that long-term deal. He didn't get it. He goes to Denver. Of course, he had the DUI a couple weeks back. He comes back last week, 17 carries, 4 targets. The Chargers, this is a good weather game. There should be able to be some points scored in this game. I do like Melvin Gordon. Of course, keep an eye on Phillip Lindsay coming out of concussion protocol. I know he was a limited participant in practice, so if he does play, it obviously lowers the value of Melvin Gordon, but they should still give Melvin Gordon some opportunity there against his former team. So I do have some interest there. J.K. Dobbins at 46. Look, Mark Ingram's going to be, he's doubtful, is what he's listed at now. He's probably not going to play. He was still getting less carries than both Dobbins and Gus Edwards on the year. There's about, 120, 105, and 103. It's something like that. Now you take all those carries, split them between Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who I have them both marked. I think those are both solid plays this week. And one other guy, we talk about that Jets-Chiefs game. The most explosive running back on that team, the guy who's going to be in on passing situations and catch those short passes and screens, in fact, scored the only touchdown last week in that game, LaMichael Pirine at 4,300 on DraftKings, 5,300 on Fanduel. He had 11 carries. He's been targeted 6 times over the last couple of weeks. If they're playing from behind, it's 21-0, it's 31-10, I think you see LaMichael Pirine on the field. Chiefs getting after Sam Darnold, a little banged up in the wide receiver core. I think LaMichael Pirine could be an interesting value guy at running back as well. And then if you really want to get crazy and you look at that, if they come out Sunday morning and they're like, look, no Carlos Hyde, no Chris Carson, maybe a little bit of Travis Homer, you can minimum salary DJ Dallas and maybe get some of those screen passes out of the backfield. He's their main back for the whole game, surprises some people. Again, it's a dart throw, but there is some value to be had. And one of those dart throws is going to go off this week and win someone some money. It's just a matter of getting exposure to the right guy. Now, let's head over to wide receiver above 6K. What are you looking at wide receiver-wise?
And look, Devontae Adams, 8,800. It clearly should go off against his secondary, but it's one of those plays where if you're looking to put it in, maybe you wait till an hour before kickoff and do your due diligence on what the wind and the conditions are actually doing in Green Bay. Because if they're not that bad, he's still going to be a volume guy. But I'm not paying. If I'm taking a shot at like 6,400, yes, but 8,800, that extreme top, you're going to need him to outplay a lot of these wide receivers. And if you're sitting there in the third quarter going, he's got 3 catches for 14 yards because they're just running the football and playing keep away on the opposite side with Dalvin Cook and that Minnesota offense, I can't justify for paying that much. This is a theme we're going to see a lot. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett at the top ends of the spectrum. They don't stop anybody, so therefore they're going to get huge target shares on the outside. You're looking at smaller wide receivers in Tyler Lockett with the ability to score 3 touchdowns a game. It's unbelievable upside on both those two guys. Even looking at the game last week in overtime, hey, maybe DK Metcalf's not having the greatest game in the world. There he goes for a touchdown late in the game, even though it was called back. 2 huge upside guys. The one interesting one here, like Michael Thomas, I know is going to be out this week, but he hasn't only played a couple plays this year, 3 catches for like 17 yards in the opener, throwing punches, getting hurt. Now it's coming out that he might not be hurt, and he wants an apology from the Saints before he takes the field again. Just an odd scenario from a diva wide receiver that once you pay them, similar to like the Antonio Browns of the world, they just go off the grid and you can't reel them back in. That's just an odd one to keep an eye on down the road with what you're getting. But Adam Thielen should be a decent play. But again, you're talking about windy conditions. Can the quarterback deliver the football? Sure, he beats his guy deep, Kyle, by 5 steps on a 40-yard route. But the ball just flies out of bounds because the wind blew 40 miles an hour crosswind across the field. You just really can't factor that in. Stephon Diggs normally would be a decent play, but again, windy weather conditions. Where I would want to pay up here and chance for a big upside, but it factors in on can the Jets score any points. I think Tyreek Hill at 6,700. He's due to hit one off. He's due for a 70-yard touchdown. He's due for 5 catches, 125 and a score. This is a good chance for him to do that against a Jets team that decent on defense, but I like to get 4 quarters out of my wide receivers, or the chance to get 4 quarters. I don't know if I'm going to get that in that game. Kenny Golladay going against a pretty good offense. Tyler Boyd, I keep on pumping him each and every week. It's obviously a favor to Joe Burrow. They're going to be down in this football game. Not a great secondary. 6,600. I'm willing to pay up for that as well. Justin Jefferson, who's one of the highest ranked wide receivers on Pro Football Focus, but again, you're factoring in a really good wide receiver on the opposite side and also some weather conditions, even though we do think they would be down. Just by default, Keenan Allen, 6,200 is a decent play, even though Denver does have a pretty good offense. And then you're factoring Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, maybe one or both of those guys probably going to score a touchdown this week and not paying that much in that mid-6 range. But outside of that, boy, I got to tell you, I think there's a lot more value in paying down this week than paying up in wide receiver outside of the first 4 of those guys. A lot of weather conditions, a lot of boomer bust scenarios where you don't want to be left holding the bag on a $7,000 wide receiver that gave you 6 points.
I 100% agree. I mean, early in the week, it was Devontae Adams, hit the lock button, lock it in.
Yes.
And look, with the wind, he runs a lot of crossing routes and whatnot, so I don't think he duds, but do I want to, and the Vikings allow the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Their entire secondary is hurt or on the COVID list. It's a disaster there, but do I want to pay $8,800, $1,300 more than any other receiver on the slate? And those conditions, you really want ideal conditions so we can go off for those sort of 40-point outings. I do like DK. Last week, we were all on Tyler Lockett. We liked the matchup better in the slot, and that paid off, made us look smart, right? This week, I think it's DK Metcalf week. The 49ers have been good, even with all the injuries, have been good against wide receivers, 6th in the league. This week, you're going to see DK Metcalf get a ton of Emmanuel Mosley coverage. He gives up 0.47 fantasy points per route ran against, one of the worst perimeter numbers in the league, even though he's a pretty athletic guy. I think this week you see DK Metcalf with some big plays. I like DK Metcalf a little bit more than Tyler Lockett this week. I'll certainly have exposure to both of them. A.J. Brown against the Bengals. I like A.J. Brown quite a bit. 6,900 on DraftKings. Now you do worry, can the deep ball get there? He's one of the guys that really benefits from the deep ball. When Ryan Tannehill is throwing the ball down the field, it's to A.J. Brown. So there's a little bit of hesitancy there, but on 9, 7, and 8 targets the last 3 weeks, he has 21, 23, and 30. He's got big upside. The Bengals 18th against opposing wide receivers. And one thing I like about it, he's not in the slot a ton. Because if you look in the slot, Mackenzie Alexander's been really, really good. William Jackson's actually been pretty good for the Bengals on the outside as well. But I do think A.J. Brown has some upside. I have a little more interest in Stephon Diggs now that it looks like Stephon Gilmore may miss this game for New England. I think that's a big injury on the outside. So if Stephon Diggs, again, that's a boomer bust type situation because we saw Josh Allen just a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs in bad weather, and it didn't look good. In fact, that offense has looked pretty porous, especially in the red zone over the last several weeks. I love the Tyreek Hill call. We had a big touchdown taken away from us a couple weeks ago in that Raider game. First possession, hits a 60-yard touchdown, beautiful throw. Again, will you see a bunch of deep throws to him in the fourth quarter? Probably not. Are they going to be a high passive volume offense in the fourth quarter? Probably not. So you want him to get it done in the first half or the first 3 quarters, which he certainly can do. And at 6,700, it's pretty cheap for Tyreek Hill. So I do have some interest there. I love Tyler Boyd. I love all the Bengals wide receivers. Tyler Boyd in the slot is going to see a bunch of Chris Jackson, who's replacing Christian Fulton. Christian Fulton is bad. Chris Jackson's even worse. The Titans are 27th in the league against opposing wide receivers. They're no better than 6th worst in yards, targets, touchdowns, receptions. They are absolutely torched in the secondary. I think Tyler Boyd's a terrific play this week. Kenny Golladay, I have him marked. It's going to be a tough matchup against Xavier Rhodes. But the fact remains, when they're throwing the ball downfield, when they need a big play, Kenny Galladay is good for these, sort of 5 catches, 125 yards. His average target is very, very deep. So there's the big play upside for Kenny Galladay. When you look at the Rams receivers, I prefer Cooper Kupp over Robert Woods this week. Cooper Kupp lines up in the slot on most of his routes, something like 58% of his routes. Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, they play on the perimeter. They've only been in the slot on 9 and 6% of their defensive routes, respectively. So he's going to see Nick Needham in the slot, giving up about a third of a fantasy point per route ran against. Nick Needham plays in that slot 87% of the time. Decent weather there in Miami. I do think Cooper Kupp's the Rams wide receiver to have there at 6,500. I like him quite a bit. And then looking for the Chargers, my last receiver over 6K that I like here, and a spot that I think you can go to, even though the Denver secondary is getting healthier with A.J. Bouye back, etc. Keenan Allen at 6,200, absolute target monster, clearly Justin Herbert's favorite target, and rightfully so. 13 targets last week. In the last healthy game he played before that, 12 targets. Even the game he got hurt, he had 2 targets on that drive and a touchdown. I think Keenan Allen at 6,200 is a nice play as well. Looking under 6K, what are we looking at?
There's a lot of value here, and each and every week we always talk about, trying to find those diamonds in the rough for the wide receiver position, because if you want to pay up for Derrick Henry, you want to pay up for Devontae Adams, there's a lot of value here coming in. And just looking at just south of that $6,000 limit, you see Brandon Ayuk at, going up against a really bad defense, 5,800. The only problem I have here is he's a rookie. Is he ready to step into that position where, even though they're banged up in the secondary, but Pete Carroll on that defense, like, hey, look, you got one wide receiver out there. Let's try to take him away, and we'll worry about George Kittle. By volume, could he work? Yes, but also that Jimmy Garoppolo effect, where are they really going to lean on him and say, Jimmy, we need you to throw for 375 in this game to win? Then you could buy up for Ayuk, but I'm just not ready to hand off 5,800 as the lead dog. I almost like him more as that secondary option where you have Deebo Samuel or another wide receiver where, hey, we want to factor in on Deebo. Let's leave this guy one-on-one on the back end. That's not going to happen now, so that'd be tough. Devontae Parker, I do like, but again, dealing with a rookie quarterback in his first start, who I do think will do solid work, but I don't know if I'm ready to say, hey, you know what, Devontae Parker, you got Jalen Ramsey on the opposite side. Good luck in this one, and try to get 110 yards and a touchdown out of him. Might be some tough sledding. T. Higgins, which looks like one of those unheralded guys, and Joe Burrow spreads it around. Old wide receiver, young wide receiver, everybody gets involved, 5,600. If you think there's points in that game, there's probably a good shot that T. Higgins is going to get some red zone work there for the Cincinnati Bengals. But I do like Jarvis Landry for Cleveland. Now that Odell Beckham is out, there's I got to get 10 targets out to Odell, or he's going to flip off in the locker room. He's not going to come to work next week. Now you can see Jarvis Landry, where they even increase his running load in games as well. There's a lot of those handoffs, even throwing passes at this point. So that Swiss Army knife guy that you might be able to factor in, Kyle, 7-8 targets over the middle, 75 yards, chance at a touchdown, and also maybe 20 to 30 yards on the ground, and only paying about 5,600 for us. We slide it down. I'm waiting for this guy to have a big game, and maybe Michael Pittman coming back at wide receiver to take some of that deep shot focus off of Indianapolis, playing in a dome. Sooner or later, we're going to get T.Y. Hilton, 7 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. You're only looking at paying $4,900 for this guy this week in a dome, in a game we'll probably get close to 50 points in. I think you're now starting to look at T.Y. Hilton, as opposed to in the years past, that value play of $6,500 now turns into $4,900, and not going against an elite defense on that end. Henry Ruggs for Las Vegas. We'll see how bad the weather conditions are, but one of those guys, as we talk about one swing of the bat in baseball, that's all you need for Ruggs. 3 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown can turn into a possibility with the amount of speed, but will they get that opportunity? And when they do, will that wind pop up, or maybe some rainy conditions say, boy, I just couldn't get him the football there when he was wide open on one of those deep routes? As we slide it down, same thing with Nelson Aguilar, 4,700 going up against a weak defense. But again, how much is that going to factor in to when we take a look at those weather conditions and you can get the football? Now, let's get into some fun parts and components here, because I like this more than talking about those high-end level spectrum guys. Hunter Renfrow, 3,800. Again, you're talking about a guy going up against a defense that shouldn't be able to hold up all that well, but the weather conditions might force it down, which benefits Hunter Renfrow, because why? Who's running the deep routes on that team? Nelson Aguilar and also Henry Ruggs. Who's the guy over the middle where if the weather conditions, hey, I just want to get some completions, 6-7 targets over the middle, 5 catches for 50 yards for Hunter Renfrow at 3,800. But I want to slide it down even more. If you want a forecast of pain with a chance to get that super, super high ceiling, morning, but you might be left out in the dark. A fun ticket to have. Sam Darnold matched up with Denzel Mims for the Jets. You say, Donnie, I'm shutting the show off right now. I don't even know where you're coming from. The max is 10 points on that team. I understand that. But if they're down 21 points, he's a rookie wide receiver. They want to get a look at this kid. You still have a live arm quarterback in Sam Darnold. They're down 3 touchdowns. Hear me out here, and you're going to be able to tweet me on Twitter. Under 2 minutes to go in the game, Darnold to Mims for a touchdown when they're marked, 4,800 for a quarterback and 3,200 for a wide receiver. That is insane, but also maybe a more sane prediction from a guy that's really low. Danny Amendola is a third target at 3,300 going against Indianapolis. Indianapolis has a really good defense. They're going to be focused on the outside. You're not going to have to worry about Xavier Rhodes and matching up. I think Danny Amendola is a pretty good shot to get 7 to 8 targets in this game, 60 to 70 yards, and pay for that extreme low price of 3,300. But if you want pain, you want Denzel Mims.
I mean, targeted 7 times last week and has played every snap that he's been healthy.
Yes.
Every game he's been healthy, he's played 100% of the snaps. He's staying on the field for the entire game, so it's something.
Yep.
Darnold to Denzel Mims, that feels like pain.
Tweet. I need you guys to, if this happens and they score, I don't care if at any point in the game, but if they get a fourth quarter touchdown together, I'm retiring from this.
There it is. Yeah, just retire on top, right? I mean, why the hell not? You're Khabib Nurmagomedov. There we go, right
exactly. There. Just leave my gloves in the ring and I'm out of here.
I friggin' love it. Now, looking at Brandon Ayuk, I'm glad you touched on that. You're probably going to see a tweet about him because I got plus money over 4.5 catches for Brandon Ayuk, and I just think that Seattle secondary can't stop anybody. They're going to focus on George Kittle. Ayuk's going to get some short screens. He'll probably even get those little touch forward passes in the red zone, the jet sweep, but they call it a pass because they tap it forward. So I think Brandon Ayuk's good for 5 catches in this game. I just don't think they have anyone who can match up with them. The entire secondary has been a disaster. When you look, he's going to see Trey Flowers or Quentin Dunbar. They have a no-name rookie starting in the slot and Lyndon Stevens. Good luck to them. I think Brandon Ayuk at 5,800 is a solid play this week. I hope I'm right there. I certainly like Jarvis Landry, even though we talked about those weather conditions. Jarvis Landry is not one of those guys where they're throwing it 30 yards down the field to him. It's quick slants, over the middle, wide receiver screens. He's going to be targeted a ton, and the Raiders just don't have anyone who can stop him. 24th against opposing wide receivers. Love T. Higgins at 5,600. I like all 3 wide receivers, but again, that Tennessee secondary cannot stop anyone. He's going to see Jonathan Joseph, who's been targeted on 21% of his defensive routes. T. Higgins is a nice play this week. I have a little interest in Cole Beasley. If I'm going to take a Bills receiver, he has not had a game in single digits in the last 6 weeks. He's on pace for something like 90 catches, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns. In the slot, where now you look at New England, they're a little banged up, may not have any Stephon Gilmore. So now he's getting Jonathan Jones in the slot. So you think the New England secondary, and they shut down everyone. J.C. Jackson, Gilmore. Opposing teams have targeted Jonathan Jones in the slot for New England on 33% of his defensive coverage routes. That is the most on the board. I have every single matchup in front of me right here. That is the most on the board, giving up nearly a half point per fantasy route ran against. Cole Beasley could be an interesting low-owned guy at 5,300 there for Josh Allen. I have some interest in Corey Davis coming back the other way in that Bengals-Titans game. Again, we talked about William Jackson maybe shadowing A.J. Brown, who's a very good corner. Corey Davis not getting the deep balls, but they're going to him in the red zone. 16 targets his last 2 healthy games. At 5,100, I could certainly go there. I have T.Y. Hilton marked as well. It's just a nice matchup there in Detroit in the Dome. He's going to see if Desmond Trufant does indeed play, giving up nearly 2/3 of a fantasy point per route ran against and a 26% target share. Should be a nice day for T.Y. Hilton, of course, always risky. One guy for Denver that I do like is Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick may be out in that game. He's been banged up. Jerry Jeudy's got some big play upside. Chargers are 10th against opposing wide receivers, but when you look at his matchup, Jerry Jeudy lines up in the slot 75% of the time. Desmond King giving up about 1/4 of a point there. I think Jerry Jeudy could be someone interesting to keep an eye on. And then at 4,500, A.J. Green. I mean, he's been targeted 24 times over the last 2 weeks. The most targeted Bengals wide receiver the past 2 weeks. Tennessee can't stop anyone on the outside or in the slot. A.J. Green at 4,500. He's going to be popular, no doubt about it. But I certainly like the play this week. And I got some pain guys too. I was going to say Donovan Peoples-Jones, but I'm sort of backing away from that. But if you want some pain at 3,500, how about a guy like Kendrick Bourne for the 49ers? So we got no Deebo Samuel. They like going to this kid in the slot. They like going to him in the red zone. I mentioned the matchup against Lyndon Stevens. He doesn't even have a number. He literally has no number because he hasn't even played. Kendrick Bourne lines up in the slot about 44% of the time. He and Trent Taylor will take turns in the slot. Kendrick Bourne could be a boomer bust type guy at 3,500. And that's as low as I went this week. If you're looking for some real like bottom barrel guys like the Deontay kid for the Saints there at minimum salary. I can't remember his last name for whatever. Is it Deontay Johnson? It might be. I think that's his last name. Yeah. But Deontay something like that. Deontay Davis. That's what it is. Deontay Davis. Without Callaway, Michael Thomas, and Emmanuel Sanders, that could be a route you could go as well. All right, let's get to the tight end position, shall we? Looking at tight end, just go through the whole position. What do you just like all the way around the whole position?
Yeah, I mean, the top of the end guys should be fine. I mean, George Kittle going against that Seattle defense, what do you figure? 10-plus targets for him. He's probably going to have a big day. So paying $7,000, again, that's where you're going to try to find some of those guys that we talk about, the Gus Edwards at running back at 4,400 or, get crazy with Denzel Mims at 3,200, even Sam Darnold at quarterback. That allows you to take the top end of the spectrum guys that you believe will eat, and I believe George Kittle will do that. Travis Kelce's a nice also option as well, but I think I'm going to get 4 quarters out of George Kittle. I don't know if I'm getting 4 quarters out of Travis Kelce, which is the same problem that I have with paying up that much. But again, you might factor on 60 yards and a touchdown out of Kelce, but that's usually his first half, and maybe he can tackle in the second half. I don't know if you get that. Andrews in the rain going against Pittsburgh. It's always a tough go, specifically now that you add in a top-level defense and add some elements in there. I don't recommend paying up 5,800. I do like Waller in conditions, though, because I do think the one thing that when you're an ultra elite tight end with athletic ability, they're going to try to get you the football in a lot of different ways. Screen passes at the line of scrimmage, short dump offs over the middle. And if you have windy conditions, Derek Carr, who does like to check down, even in nice weather, even though he has some weapons to go deep, he's always going to be a nice play. I like him at 5,600. Hawkinson should be okay as well. Gesicki gets a little bit of a downgrade for me. I love him at tight end, but I really love him Fitzpatrick because he takes a look and says, double coverage. I got my 6'6" tight end. Let me just throw it up and see what happens. He can make that play. I don't know if Tua is going to be able to do that in his first start. Jimmy Graham by default, I guess, but I'm really not high on anybody out on Chicago to say, you know what? I'm really ready to pay, and maybe he can score a touchdown because he can, but with so many limited weapons out there and so many limited chances, I think we're actually going to get in the red zone. I don't really like that play all that much. But if you're looking at one of those guys where you just slide it down and say, we picked Trey Burton out of a hat, and he gets a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown a couple weeks ago. Last week we found some fire with some underling plays. And even when you take a look at Bryant, who scored 2 touchdowns for Cleveland last week, you're saying, well, who the heck is that guy? Comes up big. I'm not going to go back to the well with that, but one of those windy weather conditions where I have 2 really good wide receivers, Kyle. I have a really good running back. Maybe this guy gets lost in the wash and I'm able to get 5, 6, 7 targets in bad weather. That's Irv Smith for Minnesota at only $3,000. He has the ability to get 50 to 60 yards and a touchdown in this game just by default, because when you're worried about everybody else and in bad conditions, and I'm a quarterback, I want to get the football out of my way. It's 25-mile-an-hour winds. Hey, look, my big tight end has opened 7 yards down the field repeatedly. I'm going with $3,000 on Irv Smith here from Minnesota.
Hey, I like Irv Smith back-to-back games with double-digit fantasy points, 5 targets in each of those games. I think that's a solid call. Harrison Bryant, you could certainly go to in that bad weather, 3,200. I don't have any issue with that. I even have Drew Sample marked against Tennessee. Tennessee 24th against opposing tight ends, 6 targets last week. I think it's a high-volume passing game this week for Cincinnati, so Drew Sample you could take a shot on. I still think you can take a shot on Trey Burton against Detroit. Detroit's been pretty good against opposing tight ends, but again, Trey Burton, even if Mo Alley Cox is healthy, Trey Burton is on the field a ton. Frank Reich loves this guy. Phillip Rivers loves throwing to his tight ends. At 3,500, I still have some interest in Trey Burton. I'm kind of going backwards here, but that's okay. Probably my favorite tight end this week is Jonnu Smith at 4,100 for the Tennessee Titans. The Bengals allow the 3rd most fantasy points to the position. Again, we're talking about some wind and rain in that game. We're talking about a Cincinnati team that's actually pretty good on the perimeter, William Jackson, etc. Jonnu Smith over the middle should absolutely feast. Hasn't had a big game in a couple of weeks, sort of been battling injury. But when he does have those games, when he gets that 7 or more targets, a 24 and a 21 in 2 of the last 5 games, the Bengals struggle against tight ends, have for years struggled with tight ends. So I do like that. I can go back to the well and Hunter Henry. It was sort of my one letdown last week. Was targeted 7 times. They just, Justin Herbert kept going everywhere else, and they still got, it was National Tight End Day. Well, he throws touchdowns to Donald Parham and Virgil Bleeping Green. Hunter Henry, 4,200. I think you could get down with that. And I do have a little bit of interest in Jared Cook at 4,400. He's their most competent weapon. Now, I don't really like Drew Brees in the cold weather, and I do think that Bears defense is good, but they are 18th, sort of middle of the pack against tight ends at 4,400. You could go to Jared Cook. And then the one I really want to pay up for, I mean, obviously George Kittle is gonna be heavily involved, but I think you're right about Darren Waller. He's gonna see a ton of targets, 28 targets over the last 3 weeks, converting that into 50 DraftKings points. I think Darren Waller's a nice play at 5,600 as well. And then rounding out the show, defenses. The biggest wild card on the slate is always who's going to get that defensive touchdown. Obviously, last week it was the Chiefs, and Washington putting up big numbers. What do you like defensively this week?
Yeah, the normal suspects. Anytime you're going to get the New York Jets on the slate, you got to take a look at the Chiefs. You're talking about maybe 6-7 sacks possibility in that game, maybe even a defensive touchdown. You never know. You even saw last week the Chiefs score 2 defensive touchdowns basically because special teams gets one and also the defense gets one. That's always a high probability. Chargers on defense, now they have those bookends at defensive end. Should be able to get after Drew Lock, especially if Tim Patrick is down. Not a lot of weapons for them to actually get down with. But you might be able to just take one of those flyers, because even when you take a look at the Buffalo Bills going up against New England in bad weather, and also vice versa, $3,100 for the Patriots defense, even if Stephon Gilmore doesn't play, you're looking at Josh Allen back there. Not the most accurate quarterback, runs around a lot, weather conditions maybe force a fumble and pick up a defensive side, touchdown also. If you're sliding it down and just trying to say, you know what, I'm just looking for some pure maybe value where maybe my team can rise up and get a touchdown, maybe you look at the Browns in that weather with Las Vegas, because Derek Carr he fumbles a lot. When you get a strip sack fumble, we have one of the best defensive end rushers in Myles Garrett in that game, and only paying $2,600 for one of those conditions. Or also, if you're really trying to get down in the dumps, you take the Vikings at $2,200, not because it's Aaron Rodgers. Say, what are you doing? Maybe you can squeeze out 2 or 3 sacks. Maybe in the windy conditions, you can come up with a pick or two in that game and try to justify $2,200. But outside of that, normal suspects come up. You're looking at these games in the bad weather and saying, where can I tackle and have fun? Chiefs is expensive at $4,500, but again, what's the upside of the Jets? 14 points, come on.
Exactly. I mean, the Chiefs, obviously, I have them marked up, the Chargers and the Rams. Yep. I'm right there with it. Looking down here, I got the Saints at 3,400 against that Chicago offense in the bad weather, especially with no Allen Robinson. I could see a pick 6 for the New Orleans Saints on the road there at 3,400. Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins healthy should be able to shut down Mooney and Anthony Miller and Javon Wims, whoever the hell they want to throw out there. I got Buffalo marked at 3,300 as well. Look, Cam Newton already playing like crap. Doesn't really matter that Harry and Edelman are back, but it can't help when you're trying to revive your offense that now you're throwing to Gunnar Olszewski and Jacoby Myers. That doesn't seem like a recipe for success.
And nobody at tight end. They have nothing on that team. Amazing.
Nothing. What is it? Ryan Izzo and Matt Asiasi, who they barely. I mean, it's a dumpster fire in that Patriots offense. I always have the Colts marked. They're at 3,100. Stafford's good for one of those throw. He tries to do too much sometimes. Can kind of throw up that balloon ball, as we were joking about the other day on the show. And if that happens, the Colts certainly have the ability to take it back to the house at 3,100. I've got the Green Bay Packers at 2,900 as well. I think Kirk Cousins is kind of a noodle arm type quarterback. You get those windy conditions. Jair Alexander, very good on the perimeter. I could see Kirk Cousins making a mistake. Look, going into last week, he was tied in the league with turnovers with, Carson Wentz and Daniel Jones. Even though this is not an indictment on Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz is an absolute stud who's just battling with nothing, trying to win football games. Kirk Cousins, it's a different story. He's got weapons and got players. He just sucks, and now we've got 25 to 40 mile an hour winds on the road in Lambeau Field. I think the Packers at 2,900 are a decent play. I've got the Bears marked as well, going the other way against the Saints, because Drew Brees is not a great quarterback either. So if you've got the Bears winning that game, and in your heart you think the Bears are beating the Saints, then go with the Bears defense. If you're like me and you think the Saints are winning that game, go with the Saints. They're 28 and 3,400. And then you mentioned it, the Cleveland Browns in those conditions with Myles Garrett. Even though that offensive line for the Raiders is good, it looks like Trent Brown's going to be back as well. Didn't they take him off the COVID list, I believed, yesterday or the day before? 2,600 for the Browns. Myles Garrett's always good for a strip sack fumble. Then you get a quarterback in bad weather conditions. I think there's some upside there as well. Well, I think that wraps it up. Again, a big thank you to Donnie for being here. It just makes the show exponentially smarter, so we appreciate Donnie being here. Don't forget to check him out over at rightwager.com. Don't forget to go into that video description. Click that arrow right there. Check out all the links. We've got links to our shows at S Sportsbook Review. I just have a link to the channel. If you're betting on anything over there, join Flash and Alex for soccer, Lee and Dave and over there for MMA. I mean, Chris and Gary, college football. Tons of smart people over there giving you great picks, so be sure to check all that out. Donnie and I will be live Sunday morning an hour before kickoff answering all your questions, or as many as we can get to anyways, breaking down all the games, picks, predictions, and plays. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, qualify for our giveaway. Congratulations again to our winner, Winter Warm. Again, a big cheers to you all. I hope you have a safe and happy Halloween, a good weekend, and Donnie and I, we will see you Monday or Sunday morning over at Sportsbook Review. Thank you for watching, folks.